Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where frontline sales leaders teach you how to build and scale an outbound sales team. Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Collin Stewart. Today, I'm joined by Brian Carroll. He's the CEO of Markempa, where marketing meets empathy. He's a speaker and fellow podcast host. He's the host of the B2B Roundtable Show. Brian, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Collin.
It's like one of those crazy sales podcast crossover episodes. Like when they had the Simpsons on Futurama or like.
I love it.
So tell me a little bit about your background, because this is the subject we're talking about today is like how to deliver empathy as a sales development rep, or basically anybody who's working on messaging, scripting, etc.
Yeah.
And so before we jump into some of the content, I want maybe give people a little bit of the context, because I think it's super important where all this came from.
Yeah. So a bit of my backstory, and I started out 25 years ago as an inside sales rep working for a tech company and a financial services company. The tech company is Cray Research. Their claim to fame was supercomputers, and they still do it. And so, University of Minnesota, I was working as an intern, and I got to do appointment setting, calling corporations for Cray, and then also bank eligible mutual funds for a company called Piper and Piper Trust. And so they focused on selling bank eligible mutual funds. So I had an idea while I was still a senior at the University of Minnesota of, hey, I worked here. I was making at that time a lot of money, which was $12 an hour, which, 25 years ago, that was a lot for a college kid. And so I was like, my time's being billed out at 3 times this, and I bet I could sell what I'm doing and work part-time and make a full-time income. And I got married, had a kid. My wife got pregnant while I was still a student, despite our parents' best advice. And so I had this motivation, and I ended up in my first 2 weeks, I sold 40 hours of work. And that's a whole story in and of itself. But I ended up hiring people at the company I worked for to moonlight for me. And so in my first 2 weeks, I had contractors and then employees, and we ended up becoming an Inc. 500 company. I grew from a one-person company to 28 people in 3 years. And wow. The company moved from being Carroll Communications to In Touch, and we ended up running 350 inside sales programs. And when I sold the company, we had 62 full-time people. And it worked with brands from SAP to Marketo, Adobe, most of the Google. So you think of the who's who in tech, those were my clients. And while I was there, I had at In Touch, I wrote a book, Lead Generation for the Complex Sale. McGraw-Hill published it. And it was really taking this holistic view of seeing. Most people said, well, what's the best way to generate leads? And, I'd started out on the phone, and I saw the internet change the way people buy. And so I saw content was a big deal. I saw email was a big deal. I saw all these different ways of reaching people, but no one had taken a holistic approach. So my book was the first book of its kind, bringing a holistic view to account-based marketing, what it's called now. Back then, it was major account selling, target account selling, strategic account selling. So that was all the work I did. And I focused on helping marketers understand, what do salespeople really need? Salespeople focus on opportunities, they focus on accounts. They don't care about leads. And so, which brings me to today, I'm doing different work, but it happened in 2014. I had a Jerry Maguire moment, and we can talk more about that. But that's my background. That's how I got into knowing a little something about inside sales, because I literally did it, made thousands of calls and then hired people to make tens of thousands of calls.
You can't tease us with a Jerry Maguire moment and then just like steamroll past and be like, what, there's this amazing thing that I happened to see and create. But you know what, let's not talk about it. It was probably the best thing I ever did, but let's just move on.
Yeah. So we grew our company. We sold it to Mech Labs, which owns Marketing Sherpa and Marketing Experiments. And what excited me was that all this stuff I had an experience, and you develop these best practices, but I couldn't explain if I worked for one company and then worked with a direct competitor. And let's say you learned a lot, you aren't going to use the same exact messaging, but you have this idea, but you'd have completely different results. And why is that? Why is it that something works really well here? And this is something everyone, I think, in sales marketing, we copy each other all the time. And then someone had a fantastic success, and then you try it and you're like, oh, this sucks. It didn't work at all. I don't understand. What's wrong? What am I doing wrong? So what I loved is Mech Labs was bringing science to marketing and sales. And I thought, man, if we could bring scientific method and research and actually have evidence instead of just relying on experience only, wouldn't that be cool? So while I was there, I learned how to run experiments and treat the internet as a living laboratory. We brought that to inside sales and management. And so a few things happened in my life after selling my company. I went through a hard divorce. I was having, in some of this, it forced me to answer bigger questions. And so it was about a year after that, someone sent me a video, and it was, in effect, a feel-good news story about a company that had been nominated for Nobel Peace Prize. Mother Teresa had given them a public endorsement. And then you'll never guess what the company is. They're a collection agency. So I'm watching this quick 2-minute video about this feel-good story. And this collection agency helped people actually deal with the reason why they couldn't pay their bills. This was their secret sauce. The CEO said, I want to be compassionate. And with collections, which seems like a misnomer, right? Like collection agencies being compassionate,
doesn't make any sense.
Especially in America, yeah. The most complained about industry of all of them is actually collection agencies. So, and here Mother Teresa is endorsing on. The reason being is a group of employees said, what if we actually help people deal with the reason why they can't pay their bills? Like they lost their job or they can't find a job. What if we help them find jobs, for example? And they started doing this for free, like resume skills, interview skills, job locating skills. And in the end of the interview, the news anchor says to the CEO, so what's the impact? You give away all this free services. He said, we're actually 200% more profitable than we were before. We're 200% more profitable than anyone in our industry. And now single-handedly, they're hated because they're trying to get a legislation passed to make it harder to be mean to people when you collect from them. So that's because that's really the strategy. So I was watching this, and I had been in a hard spot, painful. Maybe I was just more open, but something inside me snapped because I realized here's a collections agency looking at it, and the news story said their strategy was kindness, and I said, well, no, I think their strategy was empathy, which is they put themselves in the shoes of their customer and tried to say, what's going on and how can I best help them? And then they use that to inspire them. And so for me, I just sat there and said, I realized we were talking about putting customers first, but really every call we made was about converting someone. Every email we sent was about converting someone. And I realized that I was saying one thing, but I was treating people as objects to convert instead of people who needed help. That's what I thought to myself. So Monday morning, I met with my team and I said, you guys, I showed in the video and I said, I want us to change our approach to how we're connecting with our customers to focusing, helping them in a way. We say we're doing it now, but I want you to see that here's what we're doing. All their emails, everything, we're trying to convert someone right then and there to a lead. We have these objectives. And I said, I believe that if we actually focus on helping people more like a hotel concierge does, they try to help people get what they want. If we did that, I think we could do better. And I was expecting to have, if you remember the movie Jim Maguire, people clap, and they're like, I give them a week. I didn't even have that. It was crickets. Someone who'd been on my team for 10 years raised his hand. He's like, if we do this, Brian, how are we going to get leads? And, those of you who are watching or listening to this might have that same question. And so here's what we did. We started changing our approach to see from the perspective of the recipient, to ask, what's really motivating them? Why did someone download a white paper? Why did someone attend a webinar? Why did someone come to one of our events? And the expectation at that point in time wasn't that someone would call and convert them. It was, there was something behind that. And we had to understand what was their job they were trying to get done. And the big aha for us is when we started focusing on people answering what was the job they were trying to get done as a result of that, everything started to change. Now, you can't see, I would show a bar graph. The number of calls my team made didn't change. The number of conversations improved a bit. But the biggest number that started changing is when we focused not on getting leads, but more on how to connect and help. We moved from 11 sales accepted leads per month to 33 sales accepted leads per month. Ironically, by not trying to get leads at all, just helping people. So that was a 303% increase. And at that point in time, I was like, this is changing my whole world, because I realized everything we were doing is object-based. Why don't we be more human-based in our approach? And so I had to spend most of my team changing, like my team had to feel safe to do it. So we had to change how we paid people. I used to pay per lead. I used to pay a percentage of revenue. And it was like, we had to focus on what was the highest amount they got paid to have them and pay them at that level to feel safe so they could actually focus on helping instead of what am I going to get out of it? The other thing we had to do is change the messages themselves. And this was hard because we had been so focused on conversion thinking. And the big aha, or my big takeaway, is we had to focus on emotional connection before conversion.
Okay. So
that's what moved me into this whole trajectory of 2 years after this experience. I ended up going off on my own, seeing empathy as a sales superpower. And so I've been spending the last 2 years learning. So that was fairly rudimentary. Just the best marketing selling feels like helping because it is. You know, we started practicing that, got a lot of results. But now I've been spending time on how does that influence our messaging. And so that's what I've been doing in the last 3 years now since then.
Right on, man. That's a hell of a story. I love the focus on the sort of the job to be done. I think like all the empathy is just a whole additional layer on top of that. But I think starting with what are they actually trying to accomplish? Not what product do I have? Not what benefits do they need? Not, what can I sell them? This is like product marketing or product management research that you're sort of bringing into the sales world. And I absolutely love that.
Yeah. Thanks, Collin. I think this is the challenge we have from sales is we're trying to get our needs met. And I think that, we talked before our session, we're in fourth quarter right now. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of pressure. I mean, everyone listening, we're like, how do I get deals done before year end? And so what I found is that in what happens in our brain is that at a chemical level, when cortisol and adrenaline gets activated, that can become a cocktail to that helps us get more focused, which is a good thing. It actually can be motivating, but it's bad when it comes to being other-centered. We actually become more sociopathic. In other words, our brain starts thinking, we get tunnel vision when those two chemicals are going because you have increased focus, so you don't see possibilities. Mm-hmm. You also aren't thinking of what someone else's response is. Because we're more at the base of our brain. That's what's happening when we feel any anxiety or we're feeling that increased adrenaline. And so what we need to do is get into our prefrontal cortex. This is where collaboration happens. This is where empathy happens. This is where creative and innovation and other-centered thinking happens. And these are the things where we connect more with other people and we actually have the ability to read another person's emotions better. And so what I spend time doing is there's this inner game to sales as much as there is the external game of how do I create messages that actually emotionally resonate, that connect to what people care about? Because the point I'm saying is we spend so much time trying to get people to care about what it is we do, what it is that we sell. And my point is you actually need to focus first on understanding what your customers care about already and connecting to that.
Totally agree. And I love the whole look at the inner game first before you start to venture outwards. I know it doesn't sum it up perfectly, but I always think of the quote from Dune. If you've read the series, fear is the mind killer.
Oh,
right?
yeah, 100%.
It's fear of that quota, and it gives you this tunnel vision. And that's exactly what you're talking about with those, your adrenaline, your cortisol mixing. And all of a sudden it's like you tunnel vision, you lose that creativity, right?
Yeah. And it's something inadvertently leaders. So we can say, focus on the customer and you're a sales leader. But then at the same time, when you're meeting and someone's behind their number and you're having that pipeline review meeting, you can say one thing, but the response and happening in your rep's brain is going to be completely the opposite of your intent, because
100%.
they now are freaked out about, I got to meet my number. And so the challenge was for me is there's a power question, and I think it's World Blue. Tracy Fenton's the founder, but anyway, it's what would I do if I weren't afraid? That's the power question. And so when it comes to sales, what would you do if you weren't afraid is you would be confident. You would focus on meeting someone else's need. You would do things that are different than when you are afraid and you're trying to meet your number. And so at the worst level, empathy can be a force for good, but it also, The Wolf on Wall Street actually is a great sales movie. He actually used empathy to connect to the emotion of greed. So a sociopath can still be empathetic and use it to manipulate people too. So I would say, you got to have your inner game of caring, okay? And, but that the danger is empathy can be used for good or for bad. It's not going to have the lasting staying power. And that could be a whole nother conversation in and of itself. But this is a superpower. But think of any comic book. There's people who are use the powers for good or for evil. So
100%. And I think what you're saying is so relevant today, when it's so easy to just, you get that tunnel vision. I'm trying to hit my quota. I'm trying to book X number of meetings. I'm trying to close X number of deals, right? It's so easy to just I don't know, make some more calls, send some more emails, pressure the customer, try and shoehorn them into something that doesn't fit. And it's not necessarily, bad people. It's sort of systems that aren't designed in a way that's empathetic to the customer.
Yeah, and I think if you take at its worst, what's happened is when you take that fear, and then you weaponize it with technology, and weaponizing it creates a horrible experience for customers. And so tools that could be great in terms of automating, for example, who said that the 3 email sequence was the best way to do cold emailing? Or the 5 or the 6. I've heard people say more is better. If 3 is good, why not 6? If 6 is good, why not 12?
Yeah, I remember reading one blog post a few years ago, and it said, "Oh, you've got to send 12. Look at all this. Is I got some response in the first, and I got nothing, and then on the 12th email, it shot right up." And I'm like, "Yeah, statistically significant data? I don't think so."
Yeah. So if you think about the experience of the customer, sending an email saying, I just want to be at the top of your inbox when I haven't responded, and you sent me an email on Thursday, it could be that I took a long weekend. There's a whole host of reasons. But my point is that the messages themselves, and we can go into, how can we improve our messaging? But I think it starts with first thinking about, before you do something, ask, if I were the recipient, how would I respond to this? And I would say, more importantly, you need to get to the point of being your customer, which is the only way to do that is you need to have some tools to overcome your own bias. of how am I going to get a deal done?
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to get them to buy? To seeing the customers not trying to figure out how are they going to buy. What they're trying to do is figure out how am I going to get a change? How am I going to make this change happen inside my company? And they're asking themselves, do I really want to do this? Is this worth it? Because they might have hope on one hand that things could be better, but most of the time buying is a huge pain. It's an emotional cost. It's risky. It's risky to someone who's trying to mobilize and drive change in companies. And it's not just risky to them from a career standpoint. It's like, what will my peers think of me? What will my team think? How is this? And so what we got to actually think about is instead of trying to drive the funnel, think of yourself being like a Sherpa helping your customer climb the mountain. Mm-hmm. And they're going through a whole, we spend this time thinking of the funnel analogy. And I would say when customers buy, it's like a hero's journey, man. It's a hero's journey for them to actually change their company, because not only do they need to climb the mountain, they got to get other people in their team to climb the mountain with them. Some of them don't want to. Some want to climb different mountains. Some of them think they aren't even a mountain climber and they shouldn't even bother. And so what you need to look at is how can you enable that person? And I love the analogy of a Sherpa, because the climber still has to climb, but Sherpa, you have experience, you've helped other climbers. You can provide guidance, you can provide resources, you can provide tools. And so I think that kind of analogy helps change the calculus to realize the Sherpa is not in control of the climber, but the Sherpa makes the difference that the climber can actually do the journey. Mm-hmm. And so that's some of that inner game thinking that we can work on.
I'll double up on that one. I remember reading a book that it wasn't a sales book, but it was a great, helped me frame up the sort of mindset of the customer is the hero. You're just the Sherpa. And it was Nancy Duarte's book called Resonate. And she's got a great TED talk. I'll throw a link in here, but basically same analogy. And she's like, the customer is Luke Skywalker and you're Obi-Wan or you're Yoda. Right? You stay the hell out of the way. Yeah. And be the tiny green man, but it's Luke that's doing all the work. It's Luke that's putting his life on the line. It's and so that idea sort of like it broke open my mind a little bit and was like, oh, there's another person on the other line here. And it was sort of like the journey into being a little bit more empathetic to the customer, because it's just such a key point to realize that it's so easy to get stuck on, I got to hit my quota. I'm doing my job. I got to sell my products, my, and you're just so wrapped up in myself that you forget that there's another human on the line that's just trying to do something and they're trying to do their job. Right. And the best, and like trying to sort of bridge the gap and find what is the best way that our company can help this other individual sort of achieve their goals was sort of really cracked it open for me.
I love it. And I think that's a great resource. And here's the thing, this is, we talked a bit about this offline, Collin, and I wanted to bring it up is if you want someone to buy, what you need to do is actually help them make that decision emotionally, because what neuroscience, there's a neuroscientist that's like the patron saint of sales and marketing, in my opinion. His name is Antonio Damasio. Mm-hmm. And here's what he found. All decisions are actually grounded in emotion, or to put it a different way, if we can't access how we feel, we actually can't decide. And so what his big aha is that every decision, he said, we aren't thinking machines that feel, we're feeling machines that think. And so what you need to do is actually connect to the feeling your customer's experiencing at that moment. And so think about it. If someone's feeling fear right now, that's not a productive place for them to be. And they aren't going to be able to drive change that way either inside their company. So how do you help someone feel calm? How do you help someone feel more secure? How do you help someone feel more confident and is part of that capable? And so, or if someone is feeling overwhelmed, how do we help them have that sense of well-being, where I actually can, I'm not completely overwhelmed and I actually am in a place, in a space where I feel grounded. And so what Damasio's work is really all about is, if you can help your customers address the emotion, you that they're experiencing in the moment. And this is why we need to get better at reading people's emotions. And I actually found most communication fails because, let's talk about Duarte's work and also the whole idea of being customer focused. When I read most marketing, most sales messages and ask myself, who's the hero of the story? It's the product, it's the company. It's almost never the customer.
Mm-hmm.
It's about, so who's the hero? It's usually you, the sales rep. And you're not the hero. It's your customer. So that's the one thing. The other thing is the emotional resonance. Most of the time, we aren't actually connecting to how someone's feeling. So, and it's interesting and it's amazing how much communication that connects in that way, so that you can actually help someone move to a better space, a more productive emotion. And there's actually a paper called The New Science of Customer Emotions. It's in Harvard Business Review. I encourage everyone who's listening to this to read that. And you should be able to get it for free. And I think you can put that in the show notes as well, because they just talk about what are the top emotions that can help people buy. And I think as a sales rep or someone in marketing, we got to start there.
100%. I'm just adding the link right now. It's a freely available HBR article. Yeah. And you're totally right. That's exactly where we need to sort of get to. I'm wondering, so I understand that, hey, this is an important piece. So when it comes to, because we've talked about, it's not just an attitude piece. It's not just something you can say. It's something that your company has to live. It's something your company has to sort of build themselves around. So like, when you work with organizations, where does that start? Because it can't just be read a book and then have this mindset and et cetera. There's got to be a whole system supporting this.
Well, there's two ways. Usually I start where I would say your CEO, your VP of marketing, where you have that air cover, that there's a care for the customer and there's a focus on being customer first or customer focused or customer obsessed. Pick your word. The problem is people say, well, we want to improve customer experience. And the issue is customer experience is the aggregate experience your customer has of you. It's the stuff that happens above the line from the experience of the people that they've talked to in your company. And I would say, it's like going to a wonderful restaurant you have that has a great reputation, beautiful ambiance. Even the food could be fantastic. It's beautifully plated. But then your servers had a bad day and just found out that their husband or wife was having an affair with their best friend. Not only that, they're dealing with major depression as a result, and they aren't attentive to you. Your experience of that server is going to cloud and influence your whole experience of everything else. So I find the most differentiating thing are the human being sides, the humans. And here's the wonderful and amazing thing. Everyone who's in sales, and especially inside sales, BDRs, SDRs, you actually talk to more people who are potential customers than anyone in the company. Mm-hmm. You actually are the living brand of the company. You actually create that impression that people have. And so what I find is that on one hand, people think customer experience is what happens after the customer. And I would say, actually, it's all of it. And when I interview customers, and so a lot of my work, I go to the customer and I ask them, tell me the story. Like regardless of the product, like take me back to the day when you first were trying to look and buy X. What happened? Why did you start looking? And I just ask them to tell me their story. I prompt them a few times, but if you look at the interview transcripts, it's like 85-20 or 90% them talking, me asking a few clarifying questions, just let them spill and listen.
I love this. I'm going to pause. This is, as a salesperson, I've done this as a product development person trying to build a product. It's one of the hardest things to do because the skills overlap between being a good salesperson and being a good product person are like 90%, but the 10% that's very different is exactly what you're talking about. I'm going to throw a link to a book that helped me. And then we're just going to move on and let you get back to interviewing customers.
Yeah. So the interviewing customers piece is, you ask them to take you back to the day, and what this is called is cognitive interviewing. It's like, this is what criminologists do or detectives do. Take me back to the scene of the crime. Okay. And witnesses, or who've gone through this, actually, we don't tell stories sequentially. We tell the story, and then what you need to do is have permission or record it, because what I find is that when I analyze the transcripts, I learned so much about what motivated them, and so you start coding things, you start learning things, and you need empathetic listening, which is, you aren't listening just to hear what's being said to respond, which most of us in sales often do. We actually need to listen, not just to understand. That's what Stephen Covey said. I think it's really good. But what you want to do is, I'm talking about deeper listening. You're trying to listen to understand why. What's not just what's being said, but you need to understand what's the motivation behind why it's being said. Therapists do this. And so therapists, psychologists do this. And the reason being is, you're trying to get motivational insight. You're trying to ask yourself and know, what's the why behind what they're doing? How are they feeling as they went through it? So instead of just what they did and what they're thinking, you want to understand also what they're feeling, and ask yourself why. And the whole point is you get motivational insight. And so when I interview customers, here's things that I hear make a huge impact in their day. I feel that person, so one thing, sales reps and inside sales reps make one of the most biggest impacts. And here's the things I hear. I felt they cared more about me than their company. I felt like they were my advocate. I felt that they went above and beyond. I felt like they helped move barriers inside their company for me. I felt that and I want you to listen to what I'm saying is that what's happening here is that customer in effect felt cared about. They felt that they mattered more than than the vendor, than the sales rep's profitability. Mm-hmm. That they were trying to get things done. I've heard people say, I felt like they helped me figure out licensing, and they actually saved me money instead of, selling me more. Like, they sat down and figured it out with me. And here's the thing. When customers felt that way, they actually advocated. Because what was interesting is that it started with the reps. It wasn't just what they said, it was the behavior. And it was that feeling of caring and that feeling of concern. So I would say three things. You got to be curious about your customers. Your customers need to feel that you care about them. And you need to use empathy to actually understand what they care about. And if you can do those things, you actually are, this is that inner game stuff. This is the stuff that leaders need to emphasize and companies need to emphasize, because I can help someone overcome all messaging issues. And I want to make sure we talk about, hey, what can you do to improve your messages right now so people can start doing that? But I would say this is the stuff that if you do this, the messaging things become way easier because you've got a foundation. It's like you've built a foundation that you now can go faster, further, because you aren't having to fight your internal inertia that you said the right thing and now their experience is a different thing, and then that causes doubt and uncertainty and anxiety in your customer, which doesn't sell or doesn't help them buy.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious because as you bring up sort of being empathetic, I'm curious your take on Never Split the Difference and Chris Voss's idea of tactical empathy.
Yeah, I love Chris Voss's book, and it's one of the best sales books that says nothing about sales at all. So it's in fact, I think that of course, there's some really great sales and marketing books out there, but I would spend time reading like Never Split the Difference. I would also read, I got another book recommendation. Descartes' Error is a fantastic book written by Antonio Damasio. There's another book called Listening Well, which is the subtitle is The Lost Art of Listening. But Chris Voss's book, what I love about the tactical empathy is, these are high stakes negotiations that he learned as an FBI negotiator. And what I love is that he focuses on trying to understand what someone's what they want. And also, moves alongside the table that most of the tactics were all about getting to yes in negotiation, in effect, overcoming the no. What I love is that he spends time really trying to understand people, and using tactical empathy to understand why, what their experience is, seeing from the perspective of a hostage taker, to actually then use that insight to help them feel safe, to help them actually the same things. It's high stakes sales without talking about selling.
Totally agree.
It's a great book.
One of my favorites, and I've grabbed the names of the other books, and I'll find Amazon links or Audible links for them afterwards. So if you're curious on which those are, check out the show notes. We're gonna have lots of notes and links on this one. But I totally agree with you. I think Chris Voss's book is one of the best sales books that isn't a sales book that's around.
Yeah, I love it, and his concept of tactical empathy is spot on. I think the when you read this book, you'll come away with ideas and inspiration just looking at your own interactions that you can try. And the whole point is he got really good at reading people. And we as sales reps need to be better at reading emotions, because same with hostage takers or terrorists, they're doing things from an emotional basis. And so the more we can understand, the better we can do. And this is true with customers in life.
Totally agree. Another one, I promise people that are listening, we'll get off the book recommendation train in just a minute here. I'll get one more, and I'll let Brian get one more in. But What Everybody Is Saying, and he was, I think, an FBI negotiator. I can't remember. I read it a few years ago, and I read it very slowly. But in an era where we're now selling on Zoom, I think it's even more important, because it talks about how to it's not going to be able to tell you how to cold read somebody, but it gives you hints as to how emotions are expressed through the body. And I think that was a huge one.
It's true. And so, Inside Out, great movie. It was all actually grounded in science. And so, you may have watched it for those who are listening or have kids, but the whole point is, we have 6 base emotions, but what science has found is that we actually have 27 distinct emotions. It's way more. And the better you can get at reading emotions, and let me give you a tip right now. I want to give someone, let's jump into a quick tactic. How can you instantly improve your ability to read emotions? Yeah, you can read micro expressions, you can read body language. I'm going to put my hand over my heart, and I want to tell you, it's called feeling your heartbeat. So a group of researchers in the UK discovered, for whatever reason, when we put our hand on our chest and we become aware of our heartbeat, and now I'm taking my hand away. So for those who are listening to the podcast, as I'm listening, I want you to still feel your heart beating inside your chest. I want you to still be aware of that. The reason why I'm telling you this is they found, for whatever reason, when we're aware of our heartbeat, that we become better at reading other people's emotions. They don't know why yet. Here's my guess. I think when we're more present to how we're feeling inside our body, we can actually be present to other people. We'll see what the research found, but what I can say is it works. So before a phone call, before a meeting, when I'd be better, it's something you can do quickly. It's a quick reminder. Getting present. So feel your feet on the floor, feel your heart beating in your chest. when we're present in our body, we just are better at reading other people. And you can do micro expressions and other things, but sometimes this work, it happens so rapidly, we intuit. And so that's why I think intuition is underrated, but most leaders make decisions using intuition, because all the big data in the world still doesn't give them all the information they need to make the right decision. They feel their way out. Mm-hmm. And so at the highest levels of office, at the highest levels of company, it's intuitive decision making because data is incomplete. And so this is where what I'm saying is tactical empathy, we talked about, mostly intuitive because you're feeling it out real time. And so that's why we got to get present.
And so speaking of getting present, we did promise people that we would translate all of this into sort of building this into our day-to-day playbook, into getting into some messaging. And I know you had brought up in our pre-call, the empathy indexing.
Yeah. So
this is something you would develop yourself.
Yeah. I in my years of working, and, you know, I'll give a plug for Mech Labs, that they ran thousands of tests and they found the most important factor to what causes people to buy. The most important calculus is the motivation of the customer. It's our motivation. And if you think about it, in Latin, emotion and motivation have the same root word. The challenge I found is we need to then be able to communicate in a way that reaches people's emotions. And so I created, as I was doing my work, the empathy index, to write messaging or to do call guides or to create landing pages that actually connect better to customer emotions. And so there's 4 things to empathy indexing. There's 4 things to reading it. So when I look at a call guide or I look at an email, the first question I ask and I focus on is emotional resonance. Am I appealing or connecting to someone's motivating emotion? So that's the first thing. The second thing, because again, as we talked about, it's about emotions. And I'll give some examples. The second thing is customer focus. And earlier we talked about who's the hero of the story. So when you look at the message, what's the focus of the message? Is it about you? Is it about your product? Are you the hero? Or is it about the customer and what they're trying to get done? Is it about them, in effect, being the hero? So emotional resonance, customer focus. The third thing is relevancy. And so this gets into, are you speaking to that specific persona? And are you speaking, is the story you're talking about relevant to them? You know, are you sharing stories and insights relevant to that company, the right industry, the right persona? So relevancy is important. Is this for me in my organization? And then fourth is clarity. So when you're clear with people, that actually is stronger than being persuasive, because clarity helps someone understand, and people who are unclear can't be persuaded. You know, so is what you're saying clear about what you're asking them to do? Do they have clarity about the decision that they need to make? Is the words that you're using buzzwords, or are you actually in gobbledygook, or are you actually speaking words your customers say? And this is why when I interview customers, when I record things, I literally often write emails using phrasing and words real customers have said. Not what I heard from my product marketing team. There's this huge difference, because someone who's actually doing their day-to-day job knows what it is, and they know how they talk about it. So let's talk about the empathy index from an email perspective. It could be, and I can give an example for nurturing, and then also for call guides. But does that help just to know, like, these are the 4 things you can look at right now with any message? We'll just quick restate it. Before you send a message, ask yourself, is this emotionally resonant? Am I connecting to an emotion that they're likely experiencing? Or what's the emotion that I'm speaking to at this moment? Either what they're feeling right now or how we'd like them to feel. You got to actually connect to both. 2, customer focus. Is the message all about you and what you're trying to get done, or is it about the customer and what they're trying to get done in terms of who's the hero? Relevancy is, as we talked about, to me, my company, does this fit the story that I'm experiencing, or am I going to read this and say this doesn't relate to me at all? And then clarity, is it clear what you're asking me to do and what my next step is? And amazingly, so many communications aren't clear. It's just, we often can say in 3 sentences what could be done in a short phrase. So that's and often the point of an email, for example, isn't to sell someone. The point of an email is to get a reply or a click. You're not doing it to sell someone. Take them somewhere. That's what the landing page job is, or that's what your conversation is. But too many people are trying to sell completely through email, and that's not how people are buying. So anyway, should we get into some examples?
Yeah, and I'm going to throw an interesting link if you're not quite convinced about the need to sort of score your emails and rewrite your emails for the purpose of clarity. There's a slideshow that's a hilarious click through. It take you 2 or 3 minutes. It's called Kill a Word, led by Patrick McLean. And he just goes and demonstrates how something that you could easily write for the first time, and it gets the message across, and then you could kill 80 to 90% of the words in it and you still get the same message across. And the cognitive load on the customer, on the prospect, is so much lower when you can communicate an idea in 2 or 3 words versus 15 to 20.
And even with how you do your, I agree with you, and even how you format and frame emails, I find that people often are sending large block paragraph emails, bullet pointing a lot in emails. And what I find is bullet points instantly cue a customer that it's a sales message. And it's not the best way to reach someone as opposed to a phrase. It's things that we've tested. I've also found plain text emails or Outlook emails that, or if you send through Gmail, but that removing graphics and just being natural. Most SDRs, BDRs are sending those kind, but marketers are trying to send graphics laden emails, and they just don't work as well as just literally when it came from a person. So let's jump into an example. I want to, and I can give you a quick example, but I just want to say, like, this is the kind of message someone might send, and this is from a company. It's now Cvent, but it used to be Reg Online. And so here's an example of a nurturing email. I'm going to read it real quick because people won't be able to see it who are listening to the podcast. But here's an email. The point was being sent to get someone who was going to start a free trial to actually complete the form. So they started their email and then they didn't finish. And so the point was to get someone to set up a demo account. And so many SDRs, BDRs, that's one of the things we're trying to do. It's one of the most important steps is getting a demo, especially when you sell SaaS. So the subject line, your Reg Online access. So hi, so-and-so, you're just one step away from getting free access to Reg Online, our award-winning event registration and management software. Quickly move and make an event website, try our event management marketing tools, build a registration form, or even generate custom name badge. So I want to just pause here. And when I empathy index, there's things I look at. So just ask yourself, what's the emotion here? So I didn't complete a form to finish my free trial. So are you connecting to the emotion I was experiencing to why I didn't? Not really. It was pretty poor. Customer focus. Who's the hero of this email? It's all about the product.
It's the software, for
sure.
It's
the software, right? It's about how great it is. And so the next step, and then relevance. Well, the relevance is okay because I knew that I started something, and clarity. We'll go into the next step here. So the next paragraph is click here to finish your profile and get started. And then your profile is kept secure. We promise never to misuse your information. So the point here is to get me to finish. Now, this is a pretty typical sales message that, most emails I get are about the product. Most emails I get are about the demo. Most emails I get are about us, about the company. So what I want you to do is ask yourself, if you were be the customer now, and I would say, like a secret shopper, when they go to a retail store, they literally shop and then they talk about their experience. I want you to be the secret shopper of your own messages. I want you to be the secret shopper of your call guides. So we used the empathy index, and so we said, okay, talking to customers, the reason why I didn't finish is they might have been anxious about giving out their information. Maybe they didn't want to get hassled. They just simply wanted to get a free trial done, and they were worried about giving out their phone number because we had that on the form. So here's the example. I noticed you started the process of getting free access to Reg Online, but weren't able to finish. Are you concerned about giving out your phone number? Are you worried about high pressure sales tactics or mandatory contracts? So I just want you to notice we were connecting at that point to the emotions, right? Mm-hmm. Which was the emotion most likely was anxiety that they were feeling to why they didn't finish. So we used that and led with that emotion to connect to. Now, the point is I don't want to leave someone anxious. I want to help them feel relief from this anxiety. So this is where we transition from anxiety to relief. We believe our product sells itself, so we're just here to provide you with whatever assistance you need in getting your event up and running in whatever way works best for you. We promise never, and then the same sentence. So I just want you to notice we transitioned from anxiety to speaking to relief. Did we talk about the product at all?
No.
And my relevance is the same. That didn't change. But then we go into the clarity actually improved a bit. And so the difference here is before, and think of your own emails you send as a BDR or SDR, they were getting a 1.58 conversion rate, 1.58%, which is pretty good. Empathy-based, though, they went to 7%. And so what this meant is a 349% improvement in the amount of demos. 40% of these demos actually became paying customers.
Damn.
So think about, the impact when you're empathy-based. And so, when I look at call guides, it's the same thing. When I look at landing pages, it's the same thing. So I ask myself, how emotionally resonant is this? How customer focused is this? How relevant is this? How clear is this? And what the empathy index is allowing you to do is to come outside of your bias and saying, if I were the customer, how would I respond? Because often that's what we do. We think we're being empathetic, and we ask ourselves that. What I'm saying is this is a tool to be the customer and then use that as the basis of connecting their motivation. That's how you get better results.
Mm-hmm. It seems like, I'm curious, are there certain types of people that are just better at this than others? Like, is this something you can hire for? Can you train for it?
I think a lot of skills like emotional intelligence, there's people who have it. It's a skill. Empathy is a skill that everyone can develop. I do think that there are people who are going to have a higher capacity, but that what neuroscience shows is every human being, unless they had some type of traumatic brain injury, has mirror neurons. And this is also known as the empathy cell. And it's what allows us as humans to pick up other people's emotions. So emotions actually can be caught by Wi-Fi. And what science is showing, or at least currently, mirror neurons are one of the key enabling factors that allows us to read and to know. And so what we need to do, though, is work with our own biology. And so I would say there's 3 things you could do to improve your ability to read emotions. And maybe we could just quickly dive into those.
Let's do it.
So the first thing, I want to go back to your hand, feeling your heartbeat over your chest. Number one, you can do that right now. And that helps you get more of the emotional space. The second thing is empathetic listening. We talked a little bit about that, but using the lost art of listening, and also therapy calls it third-ear listening. It's doing that, learning and developing the skill. This is why I talked about the lost art of listening book, is when you read this book, and when I read it, I thought, oh, well, I know a lot about empathy. I've been doing it for 3 years, focused on this, doing all this research. And I was like, oh my God, I have a lot to learn. And what I found is that the cool thing is when I got better at being aware of my own emotions, and then also being able to tune into others with empathetic listening, I saw other parts of my life improve, like my marriage, my relationship with my kids, my friendships. It's you can't just focus on how do I get to be a better sales rep. It's actually, we actually are becoming better humans, and better humans become better salespeople. Go figure. So the third thing I would say is reading fiction. And this is something that opened up for me a lot, is it doesn't matter what fiction you read, just that when you're reading a story and you're identifying with characters, what's happening is that we move outside of our own perspective into the perspective of the character. And what the research is showing is our ability to read other people's dialogues and to see the story. This is what great authors do, is they're using empathy. Character actors, and you can also do the same by watching movies that have great stories as well. And I love both reading and watching movies, but that character method actors actually are masters at being able to read emotions. And they literally are feeling them. This is what method acting is that they're actually doing accurate representations of emotions. So when we identify with other characters, that improves our ability to identify with others' emotions and read emotions better. And those are 3 things you could do right now that would instantly help you get better at reading people's emotions. And it's a life skill. It's something I continue to do. And emotional intelligence is not set. It's something that can be grown.
You sound like Carol Dweck there for a minute.
Yeah, I know. Well, and I do think this growth mindset is true. And the reason being is in my other work, I do work with nonprofits, specifically around fundraising. And I do work with organizations that are moving from having orphanages in part of the world to now having more family-based care. And so they did research and talking about kids who experience trauma who are now in an orphanage. Can they be okay? And we have this amazing thing called in our brain, it's neuroplasticity. And what it means is that our brains continue to grow and we can continue to make new connections in our brain until we die. And what I love about that is that it's like, when you look at life is about growth, we can continue to learn and grow, our entire life. And to me, that's really hopeful. Like, you aren't set. And so that's, I think is a great thing. People used to think we had a set point, and what science has shown us, no, we don't. We have potential. It's just living in our best capacity of that.
I think a lot of people got stuck in the science of like the whole myelination thing and how your brain is, I'm not going to get it entirely right. I got a friend who's in neuroscience, but it sort of peaks at a certain age. And so people thought, okay, well, once the sort of core, myelination process, and if you're listening and I'm wrong, email me and we'll add this and get it right. Because I guarantee my buddy Bean is not listening to this. But basically I think they thought, okay, peaks around a certain age. And then beyond that, you're fixed. But I think what you're saying is studies have shown that process actually, it's not just the myelination, it's the developing and the growing and the expanding of your brain that actually continues to happen throughout your entire life.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, and so what I'm seeing and what's great is growing our emotional intelligence, growing our capacity. And from a sales perspective, some of you, this might be new information. Other of you are listening saying, well, this is obvious, but I hope you took away some ideas, of how can you help others inside your company do better, and so the better we get at this, because here's the thing. The way that we treat our customers, the way that our competitors treat our customers actually impacts all of us in sales. And the good news is just like our brains that are malleable, so is the perception of our customer of salespeople and also of marketing. And so it's the experience people have in aggregate of sales and marketing that gives us a bad reputation, Mm-hmm. And so my leaning is when I sit with friends, I proudly talk about, hey, I'm in marketing, I'm in sales. And, and not everyone thinks that's a great thing until you realize, well, here's the thing. We drive the economy. We drive jobs. If we don't do our work, other people don't get to work. And so we have a huge influence inside our companies, inside our customers' lives. So, I want to change the way people think about sales and marketing, because, I think it's amazing. And because we make a huge difference in the world, whether people see it or not. I know that I do.
I totally agree, Brian. And I definitely want to, I feel like I could keep you on the show forever, and we could just keep going, but we'd never get a chance to get the episode out. So I got a couple more things I want to do with you, but I just want to sort of bring back to the question that you sort of posed earlier, which was, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And I think as a salesperson, I'm now I'm one of the founders here at Predictable Revenue, but I also sit in a sales seat. And I noticed that my sales game changed immensely now that I'm the boss, and I can't get fired for not hitting a quota. And I was thinking, and as you said that, I was reflecting on some of the deals that I've had and come and gone that were, I was a whole lot more open with the customers than I've ever been about, hey, this is a bad fit, right? Or here's why I think this is a bad fit. Or here's why I don't think you should even help us. You should buy from us, or even a customer like us, X, Y, Z. And thinking back, the number of customers that I've recommended and say, hey, you know what? This isn't going to be a good fit. This is what you want to do. Here's who I recommend you go talk to. Yeah. That's like 10X what it used to be, because I'm not afraid, because I'm not going to get fired.
Yeah. And I think of, someone I had as a guest, but I'm a fan of, is Jill Raleigh. And I remember when we first met, and she was, the top sales rep at Eloqua. Jill and I would talk, and she would spend time, I felt confident referring people to her because I knew that she would tell them why they weren't a fit. She'd be like, nah, you don't need to buy Eloqua. You're not ready yet. I don't want you to. Here's why, and people trusted her because she cared, that there's this, there's that. What's counter, and one of the things actually I had to confront, ironically, was the more powerful we feel, the less empathetic we can be. So this is actually an issue for sales reps who have, all of us who have leaders, or if you're a leader yourself, is when we have confidence and swagger, we sometimes forget what it's like to not have that, to not feel in control. Or have that agency. And so what I went through, and I think when I got knocked off my horse, going through a divorce, having an uncertainty, working now in a company that I once owned as an employee, it actually allowed me to be more open, I think, that I finally, to put it, and so there's this rub of empathy is a day-to-day thing too, and I'm not saying you do that, Collin, but I'm just saying as a leader, I saw it in myself as like, oh man, I missed it. I missed many opportunities, and my team would talk about, wow, you're just so much different now. And I think it was because I was having to do some work that I previously didn't need to. Because I had been the boss, or So there's something there for leaders. We need to be different too.
100%. I've on numerous occasions found myself not questioning a salesperson, but just like, thinking one way about a way an interaction went, about, doing this or not doing that.
Yeah.
And then I thought to myself, like, wait a minute, like I've been in that seat, right? And it's so easy to forget. And I guarantee there are probably the majority of times where, it's so easy to forget that you've been in that seat because it's been a while.
Yeah. And I'll give you an example. I interviewed a huge company. We were doing a consulting engagement, and it was like, the question is, our team just spends a little bit of their time prospecting or doing new business. And so you went from the highest level, the EVP. The estimate was like, oh, they spend about 10% of their time. The VP was about 15%. And then the directors were estimating about 20%. And then you got to the reps, like, I spend about 35-40% of my time just doing prospecting. And so there was this complete disconnect. And what we were like, you guys, when we look at the math and they're spending $100,000 per rep, I'm like, and they had 400 sales reps, I'm like, you guys are spending, conservatively $12 million in marketing, prospecting expense right in your sales team right now. Let's do the math and figure it out. And they were arguing whether they should spend money on creating an inside sales team to do prospecting with their team. I'm like, you're paying for it. You just don't see it, and so this is where sometimes, there was an emotional reaction once they got that number. But the point is people forget what it's like to be a rep, and you got to be out in the field or on the phone. And that's why I love call recording and other things to, get out of the building or get in the field with your team, get on the phone with your team. And actually that's what I did is I literally made calls with my team, sat out on the floor, moved out of my office. That was disruptive at first, but it made a difference to actually live it with them.
Totally. I've been, I like to humble myself once a year and take a couple ops myself. And sometimes it's vacation relief when one of our AEs goes away. Sometimes I'm taking net new deals or just working old ones.
Yeah.
And you realize it's like not every single deal I touch turns to gold. Like there are some crappy deals that don't belong in my pipeline. There are some, good customers that you just sort of, handled wrong. It's nice to be humbled every now and then. And
yeah. We need it.
100%. Brian, I do feel like I could hang out with you on this, the Zoom all day. But I do want to give you a chance to sort of promote Markempa in the most sales podcast way possible. So we're gonna flip the script here. We'll do a bit of a cold call role play.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Cool. All right. So set the context here. Who am I? What's my role? What kind of company do I work for?
Let's see. I think why don't we just have you be a VP of marketing at a SaaS-based tech company, and let's say you're fast growth, but you're probably, I don't know, 7-10 million in revenue in that range. Sounds good.
All right, ring ring. Hey, this is Collin.
Hey, Collin. Brian Carroll calling. I wanted to connect with you and share some resources with you. First, Collin, I saw that you were looking at Markempa, and you had filled out a form on our website, and I want to understand what motivated you to actually learn about us in the first place. What were you trying to get done?
We've got some salespeople that need some help with writing messaging.
So as you're working with your sales team writing messaging, I wanted to hear more like what's your sales team doing today that you think's working and what isn't?
We're not really sure, but the conversion rates, they're just not the same as they used to be. Okay.
Well, what I'd like to do is want to learn more about how your sales team's doing things, but I wanted to ask you is your sales team's leaning to you? What's been the biggest thing that you've been dealing with yourself in terms of trying to help your sales team with the messaging, in terms of they reached out to you, and what have you done so far?
We've been monitoring their sort of overall conversion rates and their productivity, and we've actually come to them because we noticed that the number of meetings were dropping, the response rates were dropping, our pipeline was drying up.
Okay. Well, here's what I'd like to do is I've got a few resources I can share with you. One is I put together a video on how to create better sales messaging, and it's around how to better read your customers' motivation and then create messages to drive from that. And it's something that you could even share with your team that they could begin trying right now. And if it'd be helpful to you, I'd like to offer even reviewing a few of your messages. And we put together something called the Empathy Index, which this video shows. And I could even give you some feedback on a few of your messages and provide some tips if that'd be useful to you.
I think that'd be great.
Sounds good. Well, let's go ahead. I'm going to, if you want to schedule a time now, or what I could do is send you a Calendly link. I know you've got a lot on your plate. So do you want to set up a time now, or I could send you a Calendly link and you can pick a time that works best?
Let's do it. That's
okay.
Awesome, Brian.
Cool.
Nice work, man. And can you send us that link to the Empathy Index video?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I literally will. And because that really is a video I put together. So I'll share that with you, and you can put that, make that available for your readers and listeners.
Right on, man. So I want to figure out how people can get in touch. But before, little plug for your podcast. Tell everybody what the podcast is about, what they'll learn.
So the B2B Roundtable Show is really where I bring sales and marketing leaders. We let our hair down and we just talk about topics like we're talking about together right now. Empathy, how to get better at sales as they share their stories. I also invite some authors, but the whole point is to talk about what's working and what isn't, and to give people actionable insights from people that they aren't. I'm usually trying to pull people that aren't hitting the speaking circuit all over and over and over again. So it's an echo chamber. So we're trying to find unique guests that you can learn from that you wouldn't otherwise hear from.
Right on. I've seen Dave Gerhardt from Drift on there, John Miller from Engagio. I love talking to John. I've only talked to Dave once or twice, but John's always an interesting guy.
He is. And I think John's really, I like his perspective, and he wrote something brilliant recently just in terms of the future of B2B sales marketing. I think is spot on. And, you can't graduate with a degree in physics from Harvard, if you don't know something. So John's just brilliant.
Right on. And so if people check out your video and they're like, hey, this is amazing, I want to get in touch with Brian, what's the best way for them to reach out? You
can go to markempa.com, and that's where marketing meets empathy. We've got resources there that you can access as well. I also hang out on the B2B lead blog, which is all focused on things lead generation, B2B marketing. And so we have a lot of resources there for inside sales too.
Perfect. And I'll grab a link and we'll throw that in the show notes as well. So if you're trying to track that down, it's right at the bottom of the show notes.
Awesome.
Right on. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Brian. This was awesome.
Yeah, Collin, it was great. Thanks for having me.
Right on, man.